Okay, welcome to Research Methods. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys, how to do some surveys. Basically, I'm going to show you guys some examples of some surveys to help guide you in creating your own. And then there's going to be a separate recording, which I'm going to show you guys how to use Google Forms. I want you to use Google Forms to create your surveys, but that'll have to be a separate little video that will start after we end this one. Okay, so here we are in Canvas. You're supposed to log into Canvas, find your class here, Psych 200, which is research methods. And if you scroll all the way down, you'll get to a place where it says research paper info. And you have all these bunch of things to help guide you with your research project. Now remember, the first thing you had to do, or that you were supposed to already have done, hopefully, is that you're supposed to, think of a topic that you're interested in and then go read about it, okay? And then when you read about it, you get some idea of the language that is used and how some of that research is done. And then think about, what you might want to research, basically, what you might want to do a study on, on that topic. What kind of things, let's say, you would want to ask if you created your own survey, because I want you guys to create your own survey. That's the easiest kind of study you guys can do, the easiest kind of research. So you're supposed to have done that already and have a topic in mind, and hopefully, you're on your way and you're thinking about, your survey and what you could put on it. But to help guide you guys, I have some examples of surveys over here. And the simplest, if you look down here, it says OER survey, and then there's another one that says HS survey, and then Big 5 personality survey. So I'm going to go ahead and open the first one over here so you can look at it. And I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. Let's see, can I make it even bigger? Okay, I can't pinch it and make it bigger. Oh, yes, I can. I can make it bigger over here. Let me make it bigger so you can see it even better. So you can see this survey just takes up one page. Like I said, your survey doesn't have to be that long. Okay, and this one is titled OER survey. Notice, there are 12 items here, or you can, I guess, refer to them as questions, but they're really items. They're not always questions. Sometimes they're statements, and you have to check to what extent you agree with them. But you can see number 10, 11, and 12 there. 10 is sex, male, female. I should have had another category, but, well, I didn't, okay. This thing is, I guess, outdated. I created this a long time ago. But yes, we should have another category nowadays. There's also a race, an item that asks you about your race. Technically nowadays, you should really be asking more about ethnicity. Race, like I said before, is kind of one of these constructs, and it doesn't refer to anything that's actually scientifically valid. But it's an easy item to have on a questionnaire, so often it's still used. But if you want to call it ethnicity, that's fine, but technically ethnicity is a bit more complicated. Okay, and then we have the last one there, age. Okay, the age of participants. They would simply, write in the number there. That's technically an open-ended question, but all they really write down is a number. Okay, they don't write anything more than that. And those go at the end. Those are demographic questions. If I wanted to have in there family income, let's say, or sexual orientation, or other things that just describe the participants, those would go at the end. Those are called demographic questions. But you can see that this is simple. There's only 12 items total, or 12 questions if you want to call them that. And the first one asks, I have heard of open educational resources before. That's what it asks. So this is a survey about something called open educational resources, which are those free electronic textbooks like we use for the class. And though this is not psychology related, I'm using it as an example. I created this one. I wanted to know, to what extent have people heard about these? It's a yes or no question. So what percentage of people have heard about these resources, okay? And then the next 3 questions, number 2, 3, and 4, go on to ask about things that have to do with really college textbooks and the cost and paying for them, okay? So second question asks, college textbooks are expensive. To what extent do you agree with that on a scale of 1 to 5, okay? Number 3, I struggle to pay for college textbooks. Number 4, I believe college textbooks should be free. Those are all questions that are similar. They all have to do with paying for textbooks or with, you know, the expense of paying for textbooks. So they're all together. You should group questions by type. And notice they all have the same scale, okay? And they're all, very, you know, this is all very well formatted. Everything's properly aligned, okay? You want your survey to look neat, okay? Questions 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all about how you prefer to access your college textbooks. Number 5 asks if you prefer to read them in print. Number 6, if you prefer to read them in electronic form. Number 7, if you prefer to read them online. 8, you know, on your smartphone. 9, on your computer. And they all have the same scale. If you're going to have a 1 to 5 scale, right, for your questions, those questions, hopefully you can put them together, okay? So it all looks neat and properly aligned. And they should all be on the same 1 to 5 scale. So if it's 1, not at all, to 5, definitely, they should all say that. It shouldn't be like you have one that says not at all, 5, definitely, and another one is on a different 1 to 5 scale that says 1, not at all, and then 5, extremely so, or something like that. That is still a valid scale, but you want to keep it consistent, okay? Make sure the scales, if it's a 1 to 5 scale for several questions, the 1 to 5 scales should all be the same. Okay, this is one example of a survey. Notice it doesn't have to be that long. When you create your own survey, you don't have to do something that's 20, 30 questions long. Okay, I'm not going to give you more points or think your survey is better just because it has more questions. But I do want, at a minimum, about 12, okay? And this would fill up a full page if it's double-spaced. It doesn't always have to be double-spaced, however. Okay, your survey, of course, should be psychology related. And it should be on, you know, whatever topic you choose that is psychology related. One rule of thumb that I tell my students, right, how many questions is enough? I get that question a lot. I tell them, well, as long as you can fit it on 1 page. Now, what I mean by 1 page, usually I'm thinking about a page you can print out. So back and front, right, is 1 page. Okay, so if you wanted to have twice as many questions at this, you know, 24, or you can squeeze in even more, that is fine. But if you are doing, but you should only have, I would suggest a good rule of thumb would be have about 12 to maybe 20 questions, okay, in your survey, unless your survey makes use of a scale. Remember, a scale is a predetermined measure of something, right? Like there are scales that measure self-esteem. So there might be 10 questions that measure self-esteem. And like I said, you don't have to create those yourself. If you find something that are published, that are valid, right? You can stick them there on your survey, and then you have some other questions because you're trying to link self-esteem with something else. And that means your survey would be longer, okay? I'll show you an example of that with the third example, where I have a scale that measures personality, okay? And that would mean that we would go beyond the, you know, the 20 questions, okay? So at the minimum 12, okay? But if you're gonna use something like this, that's a scale, you can easily exceed 20, but I'll show you how you can do that in a moment. So this is one example, it's an OER survey. So notice I want it to be neat. I want it to be properly formatted, not to be properly aligned. Group questions by type, demographic questions at the end, okay? Notice the questions are numbered. Although you're not gonna be doing it on, you're not gonna be doing this on a, on something like a Word document or anything like that. You're going to be using Google Forms. So the good thing is when you use Google Forms, everything is easily formatted on there. So you won't have to hit tabs or anything like that. It'll be easier. Let me show you another example. That's the easiest example, just to show you it doesn't have to be that complicated. Okay, like I said, I'm not giving you more points just because your survey is longer. It's more the quality, okay? Did you do it right? That's what I'm going to be looking for. Another example here, and this one's a bit more creative, is this HS survey. Now this HS stands for human sexuality. I taught an honors human sexuality course. So it was the honors version. And whenever I teach an honors class or I have students who do honors option, I always have them do their own research. Okay, that's what you guys are doing for this class. It's a more advanced class. You guys are learning how to do research. But I have students do research in other classes as well to take them to, take them beyond what they normally do in the class if they're doing an honors option. So I did this with this human sexuality class that I taught. The whole class was just an honors class. And I made them do research. And so therefore I created an example for them of a survey. So this one's a little bit different. So it says HS survey there. That's another thing I want to tell you guys about. When you title your survey, give it a title that it's kind of a little bit ambiguous. I wouldn't want to put like, human sexuality survey, because it's a little bit too revealing and it kind of gives away what the survey is about. And then participants may not feel that comfortable answering, the survey questions. But you can just call it survey, HS survey, OER survey, or something. What I'm saying, don't give away too much about your survey in the title. And then participants are trying to, are then able to guess what you might be predicting. And then if they know that, they can screw with you and then make sure it doesn't work out. Okay. So I just called it HS survey. And it says, use the following scale for the questions below. So again, it's a 1 to 5 scale. From a 1, not at all, right, to 5, a great deal. And I have another label there under the number 3. 3 is somewhat. So 3 is kind of a neutral response. 3 really means, a little bit, okay? Or I'm somewhere in the middle for this. Okay, that's really what that means. Let me point out here, before I forget, these labels over here, they're called anchors, okay? So they help anchor the numbers, and they help give some meaning to the numbers. And you can actually add these when you do this in Google Forms, okay? But this one's a little bit different. I was a bit creative with this. So notice, it says here, with my mother, I am or would be comfortable discussing sex, right, on a scale of 1 to 5. I don't have to put the anchors anymore over here because I already described them here. Sex, contraception, birth control, condoms, etc., pornography, sexual difficulties, sexually transmitted diseases. Actually, they're called sexually transmitted infections now. And they're all on a 1 to 5 scale. And notice how they're all properly aligned over here. And because I did it this way, because I described the scale over here, then I can leave out the anchors over here, and then it takes up less room, and I can kind of squeeze it a little bit together, a little bit more. So I was able to put those 5 questions really close together. I think that single space there. And so I'm going to be able to fit a lot more questions on this page. So with my mother, right? So this question basically asks, okay, with your mother, how comfortable are you, right, discussing these things? And the higher the number, the more comfortable you are. Please always do it that way. If you have a rating scale, higher numbers should always indicate more. If higher numbers indicate less, that's called a reverse scale. Technically, it's okay that you do that, but don't do that to yourself. If you do that, you're going to have to do some additional things before you calculate averages. Okay, just make it simple, okay? Higher numbers mean more. And then the second set of questions there have to do with the father. With my father, I am comfortable discussing, and it's the same kind of questions, right? Sex, contraception, pornography, etc. So with my father, right? And then the next set of questions, with my romantic partner. And then the last set of questions, with my best friend. I am or would be. Now it says I am because some of you may have a romantic partner. Maybe some of you don't, so you would be, right? Same thing for all of them. I am or I would be. Some people say, well, I don't have a mother. My mother died when I was like 10 years old. Okay, I would be if she was around, okay? That's why I have I am or I would be, just to cover, those scenarios. So notice, because of this, I am able to squeeze, because of the formatting, the way I formatted it here, where I describe the scale on the top, and then I have, different, and then I have the scales right here without the anchors, and I have it single space. I'm able to squeeze this basically 20 questions onto one page, and then I have my demographic questions at the end. Age, sex, really I should have an other for sex, and then I have race / ethnicity. Ethnicity is, like I said, is more acceptable. Race is kind of bogus. But I didn't want to complicate things, so I just said race, ethnicity, and then I have the things there. There's one little problem here that I've noticed. that I should have corrected, or maybe it's because I'm using Canvas and it looks like this, but there should be some more space here between black and white. Notice between like Latino and Asian, other, you can easily see this little line over here corresponds to Latino, this one's Asian. There's a little bit more space that should have been added over here. And I think it's just a little error, okay? So if I was grading my own survey here, I would take away a point for that, okay? Because it's not properly formatted. There should be a little space there, because they should know that this line over here corresponds to white and not black. But since it's right next to black, some people might get confused and think, okay, if I'm black, I check this one. But no, it should be this one. So there should be a little bit more space over here. So that is a human sexuality survey. Now, if you are gonna do a survey that has to do with anything related to sex, okay, be careful, okay? Make sure you ask questions appropriately, okay? And in a respectful way. Of course, you need to make sure that you submit your survey to me and I check it, and then I can tell you that if this is something that you should do or you shouldn't do. Okay. Like my students, they all did in this human sexuality class, they all did surveys that have to do with human sexuality, and they asked about some things that are a bit invasive, very sensitive questions, but they all checked their surveys with me, make sure that they were worded properly, make sure that it's not asking something in a very insulting way or in a way that somebody would complain and go to the administration and say, hey, there's this student that's asking me these kinds of questions. And, it's a type of sexual harassment or something like that. So be careful if you are going to pick a topic like this, okay? All right, let me show you a different survey. So that's a survey that would be for like something related to human sexuality. The first one wasn't even related to psychology at all. It's just open educational resource. It's just an example of something that's simple. Oh, I went too far. Over here, there's the Big 5 personality inventory. So here's a survey that's related to personality. And so I have one related to personality because, like I said, when I have students do honors options in my other classes, I have them, I always have them do research. Except if it's a 101 class. If it's like 101 class, I have them do something different. But I often had to teach, students in my personality class how to do surveys, human sexuality class, and other classes. So I have different kinds of surveys here. This one uses what we call a scale. So now this one, see, it says use the following scale to rate yourself on each adjective. Circle your response. So 1 means almost never true of me. 2 means seldom true of me. 3 means sometimes true of me, 4 means often true of me, and 5 means almost always true of me. So you describe the scale there, the rating scale, and then you can have, whatever you want them to rate themselves on, kind of here, single space. But I added a gap between groups of questions because all these groups of questions over here, they all measure one, believe it or not, one personality factor. If you've heard of the Big 5 personality scale, this is the shorthand version of it. This is the shortened version of it. So to what extent are you outgoing on a scale of 1 to 5? Remember, higher numbers always mean 4. To what extent are you sociable, forceful, energetic, adventurous, enthusiastic? Believe it or not, all those questions, they all refer to the personality factor or the personality dimension of extroversion. All these have to do with extroversion, okay? All these have to do with basically how agreeable you are. To what extent are you forgivable, not demanding, warm, not stubborn, modest, sympathetic, right? So, and you have other questions. These all measure to what extent you're conscientious. These 6 over here, and these 6 measure to what extent you are neurotic, and these to what extent you are open. And that is what the published scale has. So all of these, like 30 questions over here, they're not numbered, but there's 30 of them. Notice I was able to fit them on one page here, and I have them grouped in a certain way because they refer to the 5 personality dimension. This is a published scale. I'm making use of this, and then I've added demographic things, age, race, sex. I could have added, let's say, sexual orientation, and that allows me to determine, okay, are there personality differences in age? Like as people get older, do they become more conscientious? Do they become more agreeable? Less open, right? So there could be a correlation between some of these personality dimensions and age. Or race, let's say, right? Just think simply about race. Is it the case that, let's say, maybe Latinos are more extroverted? let's say, than people of other race. Or maybe Black people are more extroverted. Maybe Asian people are, less extroverted. Asian culture is different. It's more collectivist there. You're not supposed to call as much attention to yourself. There's some research that supports that. Can we find evidence for that here? That would suggest that Asian people would be a little bit lower on the extroversion scale. Who's more open? Who's more neurotic? More conscientious? We can see if there are ethnic differences or race differences, to put it simply, right? Are there differences between males and females in personality? Okay, research does show that females are nicer. They're more agreeable. Okay, perhaps males are more open. You could find things like that. So all I did here is used a scale that's already published that I looked up, okay, that measures personality. This is the simplest way to measure personality, by the way, with the Big 5 personality inventory. And then I added demographic things so that I can check for differences or relationships among these other variables, okay? So that one is related to personality. But you can do anything related to psychology, okay? It doesn't have to be personality. It doesn't have to be, let's say, human sexuality. If you have to do an honors project, also, let's say you have an honors option for one of my other classes and you're doing child psychology, your paper there has to be child psychology related. So you might want to pick something related to child psychology. If you're taking another class, then you might want to do something, whatever that class is about. But this is a research methods class, so anything related to psychology should be okay. And those are 3 examples. Notice this last one right here, the questions aren't really numbered, okay? When you use Google Forms, because I want you to put this in Google Forms and you'll be able to properly format it. And on Google Forms, it's not going to go by pages, okay? Because it's going to be on screen. It's going to be on the screen. It's going to be online. But if you were to put this on Google Forms, I want you to, please number the questions, okay? Because this is not a sheet of paper that you're just going to hand out, right? You're going to do it online now. Always, from now on, always just number your questions. I know this one's not numbered, okay? And that's a mistake that I made. And if I were to be grading myself, I would take away a few points for that, for not numbering questions. I want them numbered because when you have them numbered, this is question 1, question 2. It helps keep it organized, and especially when you have, all the data in a spreadsheet or in a matrix, then you know which one is which, number 1, number 2, number 3, right? Because you're not always going to be able to see the entire label or the whole question, for that item on the survey. So number them, okay? So even when I create my own surveys, sometimes I find as I look at them later that I would not give myself a full 20 out of 20 here. I always find there's a little mistake here. I could have done this better. I could have done that better. It's hard to get it perfect, okay? Especially on the first try. And by the way, you may send me your survey and I may suggest some changes. And then you go and make those changes and you send it to me again, share it with me again, right? As if I was a participant, and I'll look at it and you made those changes and I might find other things that I want you to improve on. I don't always spot everything the first time. So if you want a good survey, check with me and I guess keep checking, okay? Until I tell you, okay, yeah, this looks good. I don't recommend any more changes. Go then and, share it with people. Okay. I just want you guys to do a good job because and take your time with these, okay? Don't wait until the last second to develop a survey or it's gonna be awful, okay? I want most of the surveys that I get to be really good and hopefully there doesn't have to be too much back and forth, make these changes, okay, now make these, and we go back and forth 3, 4, 5 times. Hopefully it just takes one time, but in other words, try to do a good job from the beginning, okay? It takes some effort to do something that's actually good, okay? Even when I do these things, and I have a little bit more experience, I still make mistakes. And I might spot some of those mistakes even in my own work, like I'm saying, okay? All right, so those are the example surveys. A couple of rules of thumb that I wanna share with you guys. And for this, let me get something so I can look at my notes over here because I came up with a list yesterday. A list of do's and don'ts for your survey. Okay. And I covered some of them already, but let me share them with you. Okay. So here's the thing, do's and don'ts for your survey. Okay. So first thing, do use Google Forms. I want you to use Google Forms. Okay. It's the easiest thing you can do. Okay. It'll make it easy for you to write your questions and format them and easy to distribute your survey. Okay. So please use Google Forms. Number two, number your questions. Okay. That's something that I often see, that the questions aren't numbered. Okay. Always number them and make sure you number them appropriately. 1, 2, 3 in order. Okay. Group questions by subject, by scale type. We talked about that. Okay. So if there's like 3 questions that all ask about, let's say, I don't know, anxiety, then they should all be together. It shouldn't be like you have one question that asks if you're tense. Let's say that's question number 2. And then there's some questions that ask something else. And then you have question number 7 that asks if you feel anxious. No, tense and anxious are referring to more or less the same thing. They should be grouped together. Number 3, put demographic questions like age, sex, ethnicity, etc. right at the end. Put those last. Number 4, give a space for age. This is a mistake I often see. When you have age as demographic questions, you have age. All you need to do is basically put age and then provide a little space for them to write the number. Don't give options. Don't give like, oh, 10 to 15, 15 to 20. No, don't do that. Age is just a number, okay? They just write it in. Don't create categories, okay? Don't have some drop-down menu. No, they write it in themselves, okay? That's the easiest way to do it. Number 5, okay, add anchors, labels to your rating scales. If your rating scale has no labels, people don't know what a 5 is, what a 1 is. They don't know what the middle number means. You don't have to have a label or an anchor for the middle number, but if you have at least the endpoints, then they know what that means and they can guess at more or less what the middle means, okay? Use rating scales for psychology types questions, okay, for things that are psychological. So if you ask, you know, to what extent are you happy? Or if you ask about happiness, sadness, being tense, irritable, anxious, those are all things related to psychology. They should be on a rating scale of 1 to 5. You should not ask a question like, you know, are you happy? Yes or no. It's not yes or no for happiness. It's a scale. There's a range there. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm completely happy, or no, I'm completely unhappy. It's usually not like that. People are usually somewhere in the middle. You need to give a rating scale for questions like that. So choose the right rating scale. Sometimes it is yes or no. Sometimes the questions are yes or no. Sometimes it's a rating scale. Sometimes it's categories like ethnicity, right? Check your spelling and grammar, okay? Make sure things are worded properly, use proper language, okay? Proper punctuation. You know, you start a sentence with a capital letter, okay? And with a period, or if it's a question mark, okay? Those little things like that. And here's some don'ts, okay? And this one's, first one is really annoying and I see it a lot. Okay, don't write double-barreled questions, okay? Don't do that. That means that you have basically 2 questions in one. I'll give you an example, okay? Here's an example of a double-barreled question. Do you get anxious and depressed? That's 2 questions. There should be 2 questions there, okay? Do you get anxious? Scale of 1 to 5, okay? Do you get depressed? Scale of 1 to 5. Not like, do you get anxious and depressed? No, that's 2 questions. Don't do that, okay? Number 2, don't make your questions too long. Keep it simple, okay? Simplify. So here's an example. Did you have a happy childhood? Scale of 1 to 5 is probably appropriate for that, okay? Not this, okay? Not, were you happy while you were growing up with your parents as a child? That's complicated. You can simplify that question. And that's not even that long. I've seen much longer questions than that. Questions should not be complicated. They should not be long, okay? Number 3, I see this one a lot, and this is because of Google Forms. It suggests this, and I don't like this, okay? Don't use maybe as an option. You have yes, when you create yes or no questions on Google Forms, okay? Sometimes it tells you, oh, add maybe. Like, no, don't add maybe. Maybe doesn't mean anything. Maybe means it could be yes or could be no. No, strictly yes or no. Yes or no questions are strictly yes or no. Like, have you smoked marijuana? It's yes or no. You either have or you have not. There is no maybe, okay? So don't do that. I don't want to see any maybes, okay? Don't write multiple questions that ask the same thing. You know, have you used dating sites before? Okay, that's a question. And then later on, you know, I might see something like, oh, have you used adult dating sites? It's like, that's the same question. Okay, just one says adults. So I guess a dating site for adults versus any dating site. No, it's the same question. Just ask one question. Have you used dating sites? Okay. Another thing, don't make your survey too long. Okay. If you are not using a scale, which is a set of predetermined questions that are already published, right? If you're not using a scale for your survey doesn't have to be that long. Okay. 12, 20 questions should be fine, or maybe 12 to 18 questions, okay? I'm not gonna give you more points because you have 30, 40 questions, okay? It doesn't work that way. Don't use abbreviations, okay, without defining them first. Like if you're gonna mention post-traumatic stress disorder, right? You mention post-traumatic stress disorder and you put in parentheses PTSD, okay? Now, once you have defined it as PTSD, then you can refer to it as PTSD in subsequent questions. But before you use abbreviation, you must first define them, okay? People don't always know what the abbreviation means. They don't know, not everybody knows what PTSD is. Most people probably do, but they don't always know. And different abbreviations, by the way, mean different things in different subject areas, okay? For different subject areas, okay? Now, here's another one. I haven't seen anybody do this, but just in case, please don't use emojis in your questions, okay? Don't do that, okay? It's proper language, not emojis or hashtags or anything like that, okay? Do not distribute your survey without approval from me. You first must share your survey with me. I'm gonna suggest corrections and maybe changes unless I feel that it's good from, you know, the very first draft, right? Don't share it with others and start having people fill it out and give you data until I've told you it's okay. Now, some people have done that and they just end up getting into trouble. And by trouble, I don't mean that they get in trouble with the administration, but it means that they have data that is not very useful data. Because sometimes I tell them, you need to change this rating scale, you need to change this or that. But I already started. Like, no, you should not have started until I told you that it's right, okay? And the last thing, don't give your survey a title that gives away its purpose. Don't give your survey a title that tells the participant basically what your survey is actually trying to do or what your hypothesis might be. Because then if they know that, they can really screw with you and give you the opposite on purpose. Or maybe give you what you're looking for or whatever the reason is, whatever they do, it's not a good thing. You want them to be honest. Okay, now I created this list yesterday. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this list on a Word doc and I'm gonna put it here in Canvas so you can look at it yourself. Okay, I'm gonna put it right under the, right here under the Big 5 personnel inventory. Okay, because I told you verbally, but I should really have it written out. Okay, now I'm going to stop recording